Hello, everyone. Welcome to Slash Film Daily for Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about what we've been up to at the virtual water cooler. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm the senior writer at slashfilm.com, and I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film weekend editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And writers Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelista.
Oh, hello.
I was wondering if you were just not even going to bother with the hello.
I was like, should I think of something new? And then I realized too much time had gone by. So let's just all move on and pretend I didn't do that.
All right, fair enough. So Peter is away for the next few days. Jacob, who many of our listeners probably know, lives in Texas, is sort of in the middle of a disaster zone right now. Texas is, if you've been paying attention to the news, experiencing, a once in 35-year winter storm, and things are very bad there. He and his family are safe. Last we heard, so we're sending good thoughts, good vibes out to him, and hopefully he'll be back as soon as he gets power back in his house. So the show must go on. So let's just dive into what we've been doing. Brad, you have been away for a while. What's been going on with you?
So this is going to be a little rough. It's kind of a bummer to start the podcast like this, but it's something that's happening in my life that I need to address, and it's something that will be ongoing, and is a big deal. Sorry, I'm just. Unfortunately, on January 31st, my dad passed away. It was very unexpected. We had just gotten a big winter storm here in the Midwest, and the snow was super heavy and packed down. And my dad was snowblowing at my parents' house, and unfortunately, it seemed like it was a little too taxing for him. He had taken some breaks while he was doing it. And so it was, we tried to use our snowblower here at our house, and it just kept clogging the snowblower. So it was really heavy packed snow that was difficult to work through. And after he had finished, he had told my mom that he was putting the snowblower away and was coming back in. And about 10 or 15 minutes so had gone by, and he hadn't come back in yet. And my mom turned on the light in our backyard, and she saw him laying on the ground in the backyard, and he wasn't breathing, and they tried to resuscitate him and took him to the hospital and continued to try, but they were unable to, and so he passed away from cardiac arrest. And so it was super shocking and devastating. It's been a rough couple weeks, to say the least. We were not prepared for this in any way whatsoever. So, in addition to the grieving just from this absolutely devastating thing that's happened, there's a lot of logistic stuff that we're trying to figure out for my mom, because my dad was the kind of person that just took care of all the financial stuff, because he's been an accountant for a long time. That's what he'd been doing for his job for a while, in addition to being a computer guy, and he was always the kind of person just to take care of stuff to make it easier for my mom, and not just for my mom, but for me and my sister too. And so we're just completely in the dark with a lot of the stuff, and we're navigating it as best we can. And so just figuring out all the financial stuff and what's going to happen with all my dad's affairs, and what we're going to do with my mom, because it's a whole complicated thing of, my girlfriend and I are currently living in my grandma's old house that my parents were going to move into this summer, and they were going to sell their old house. And so now we're currently dealing with the aftermath of trying to get the other house cleared out so that my mom can come live over here. And so she'll be staying with us here at the house for a little bit until we move out and go find a different place to live. And my mom's figuring out what she wants to do, whether or not she wants to stay in this house, because now it's her by herself, and she was intending to live here with my dad. And further complicating things, which is very stressful, is Indiana, in their infinite wisdom, decided to overhaul the system for receiving death certificates and put it entirely online at the beginning of the year in the middle of a pandemic. And it did not go smoothly. So there's currently a delay in getting death certificates. The funeral home that we have made the arrangements through for my dad said that they at the time of my dad's passing, they had 50 families who had funerals through them, and of those 50 families, only 9 of them had received death certificates so far.
Wow.
Yeah, so it is a complete clusterfuck, and that has made it difficult because without death certificates, we can't do things like get my dad's life insurance and access the accounts that he left behind, like his 401k for work and that kind of thing. And so it's just it has basically an even bigger cloud hanging over our heads for all this logistic and practical stuff, in addition to just trying to grieve and deal with it. And so, needless to say, it's just been a completely life-altering, world-turning, upside down kind of event that I know that I'm going to be dealing with for a long time. I mean, the rest of my life on some level with a lot of this stuff, but also just for the foreseeable future with figuring out all of this stuff. So, it's something I'm sure will come up every now and then on here as I talk about things. And, I will probably make some dark jokes every now and then just to deal with it, because that's who I am and that's how I need to confront that. And there's times where it'll probably sound like things are normal and okay, but they probably won't be for a long time. So I'm just doing my best to take it one step at a time, try and find some, joy in little things. Trying to watch stuff, trying to be excited about things, but it's needless to say, it's rough, and it'll be like that for a while. But I just I do want to say I appreciate you guys helping me out so much, picking up the slack while I've been away for a couple weeks, and I just appreciate everything and everyone who reached out on social media, whether it was Facebook and Twitter after it happened. Thank you, for your condolences. Thank you for your kind words. If anybody out there who, if you have dealt with something like this, if you're dealing with something like this, if you have some advice, I would be happy to hear it. My email is onebadomen, OMAN, @gmail.com. I'm just kind of looking for anything and everything just to help hear from people who have gone through this. And I would just like to say too, I know it's cliche and a little bit trite, but nothing is guaranteed for us. Tomorrow isn't a guarantee. And so if you have someone that you love fiercely in your family, whoever it is, talk to them as much as you can, reach out as much as you can, and just make sure that they know how much you love them.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Brad, man. My heart breaks for you and your family. That's really, really tough. I would just say, sorry. I would say that if you can, keep us in the loop on all of the annoying little details of all the bullshit that you're going through right now, because I think that is important for people to hear, because I think for so many people who maybe, I don't know, lost a grandparent when they were kids, but haven't really dealt with death in a meaningful way in their adult lives or anything, it's more of a concept than a reality. And hearing somebody go through it might be able to help other people better prepare, in whatever little ways they can, so they don't have to deal with the entire full mountain that is now on the shoulders of you and your family. So, I just don't want you to feel like, oh God, I'm going to bring the podcast down again by talking about dealing with lawyers and the funeral home and any of that stuff. I really want to hear about that stuff. And I feel like the more our listeners hear that stuff too, hopefully the more it will be hammered home that, they might be able to. Obviously you can't do everything to prepare for something as awful as that, but every little bit helps, I think, just so you can have a little bit of that room to grieve and go through all of that without necessarily having every minute of your free time be filled with, just dealing with one crisis after another. So, yeah, man, we love you. And, I'm really sorry to hear this.
Yeah, Brad, you'll always have our support, whether you want to talk about these things or whether you just need, a shoulder to lean on. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing everything you've gone through. And yeah, we have your back.
I appreciate it, guys.
All right, HT, what have you been up to?
In somewhat lighter news, I celebrated Lunar New Year. And I talked about this last week a little bit in the preparations for it, and how I wasn't going to be able to spend it with my family because of COVID related reasons. And we decided to have sort of an in between for that. My family, my cousins who live in New York, we basically decided to do a New Year's potluck in which each of us would cook a dish that's typical for Vietnamese New Year called Tet. And I made fried spring rolls in my air fryer, which I got for Christmas. I was very excited about my air fryer. I have used it a couple times. I haven't talked about it on the podcast a lot, but it's been really handy. And the fried spring rolls were the first time I made something like really fried in it, and it went well. It didn't burn, and I think it tasted yummy. So that I gave that to my cousins, and we did like a drop off thing at my cousin's apartment and picked up the various dishes, and then all had our dinners apart while on. Well, we were planning to do a Zoom, but we didn't. So we just took pictures and ate it all together. So that was really nice. And then I had a call with my parents who were having a sort of mini Lunar New Year lunch the next day. So that was nice.
Aisha, I have to follow up with a question that we had last week about this. Did you ever learn any more details about, you're talking about like walking in specific cardinal directions or certain directions to represent different good luck or aspects of your life that could be enhanced or something through, during that time. Did you ever learn any more details about that?
No, I just know that I don't think like if you don't walk in that direction, it will like bring you bad luck, but it's more of an insurance for good luck. So I did walk in those directions. I took some time off, well, not time off. I like walked away for like 15 minutes to do that very specific walk around the block in very specific directions. And I think I guaranteed myself good luck in wealth and love. Hopefully, we'll see. I did get a package from Mondo that I don't really know what in promotion for, but it was a dating game, and like the same day that I did this cardinal direction walking thing. So I wonder if that was the universe answering me. I don't know.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah. So I also made some dumplings from scratch with my roommate and some friends, just a couple of them, not too many indoors, which was another sort of wealthy thing. I think that's more common in Chinese New Year because we don't really make dumplings a lot with my family, but we did that as another sort of added festive element to the weekend celebrations.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. So in the what we've been reading column here, I'm the only one who's been reading anything. I read Dreams from My Father, which came out in 1995 and is a memoir by former President Barack Obama. And it, like I said, came out in 95. So he, at that point, at the point that he published this, was just starting his political campaign for Senate in Illinois. So this is long before he became president. But I thought it was interesting, an interesting insight into some of the challenges that he had to go through growing up. It basically is an entire recounting of every major sort of event in his life up to that point, where it starts with his upbringing and the fact that he didn't really know his father too well, and it goes through the point where he becomes sort of a political organizer in Chicago, and talks a lot about activism and organizing and community outreach and things like that. And then details a lot of his trips back and forth to Africa to try to learn more about, where he comes from and meet like extended members of his family and learn, who his father was and sort of try to find out a little bit more about himself in the process. So it's a very personal book. I think I don't know. I guess I think the activism parts and the organizing parts are so they feel very out of date because they happened so long ago that like it was really like sort of a pre-digital world. So I feel like the entire idea of community outreach has been radically transformed, in the past, 20, 25 years. So I'm not sure how applicable a lot of the lessons or little anecdotes are there to like current people who are looking for tips or anything like that. So I wouldn't necessarily look at this book through that lens, but if you're just looking for, sort of an early life recounting from a former president, I thought it was, pretty decent. So that is called Dreams from My Father, a story of race and inheritance. Let's move into what we've been watching. Hey everyone, this is Ben. Sorry to butt in here and interrupt myself, but I just wanted to drop a spoiler warning for Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, which is the show that we are just getting ready to talk about right now. Chris and I spoil essentially every major reveal of that show over the course of our conversation. So if you want to go into that series not knowing any of those revelations, I would just say skip ahead to the 25-minute and 54-second mark on your podcasting platform. Otherwise, here is our conversation. Chris, you and I watched a Netflix documentary called Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, or Cecil Hotel. I think they pronounced it both ways in the documentary. But let's go to you first. What did you think about this documentary series?
I sort of liked it, but like so many docuseries now, it's too long. There are too many episodes. Like this could have been easily whittled down to like 3 parts or maybe even like 1. For those who don't know, it's the story of Eliza Lamb. She was from Canada. She came to Los Angeles on her own, and she checked into the Cecil Hotel, which is in, is it like downtown LA? Ben, do you remember? I haven't seen this in a while.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah. So, and she didn't realize that downtown LA is kind of like, a little seedy. That's where Skid Row is basically. And the hotel she checked in is, for lack of a better term, a dump. She was there for a few days, and then she just vanished into thin air basically. And no one could figure out where she was. And the police started investigating, and they released this video online. And the video shows her getting into one of the one of the elevators in the hotel, and she's acting very strange and erratic. And that video basically went viral back before anyone really knew what like viral videos were. Really, they hadn't really taken off as much as they are today. And all these theories propped up because if you watch the video, and I'm sure you could find it on YouTube even if you don't watch this documentary, it's a creepy video. She's acting erratically. She keeps behaving as if she's talking to someone who isn't there. She steps, in and out of the elevator. She pushes a bunch of buttons. It's just a weird video. And that was the last trace anyone had of her. And then a few days later, they found her body in one of the water towers on the roof of the hotel. And all these conspiracy theories started cropping up, and people were wondering what happened to her. And the eventual conclusion was that she died by suicide, maybe by accident, maybe intentional. Those details we don't know. But she had documented mental problems, and that was really the only real answer anyone could think of. That didn't stop conspiracy theories, and they're still going around today. And to this documentary's credit, it does get around to pointing out, that it's very likely she took her own life, that there wasn't a conspiracy, that there wasn't anything supernatural going on, because that's another theory that people have, that the hotel is haunted and all that stuff. But it takes a very long time to get there, and it keeps going down these different paths. And some of the paths are interesting. It gives you a background on the Skid Row area. And I thought that was interesting because I didn't really know a whole lot about that. At the same time, it keeps pointing out these red herrings. Like there's like this guy who's like a metal artist, and he makes his own like music on YouTube. And, he paints his face, and all his music is dark and about violence. And they spend like an entire episode where they're like, well, this guy stayed at the hotel and he writes songs about killing people, so maybe he killed her. And it's like, get the fuck out of here. You don't need an entire episode devoted to this bullshit red herring. So I really wish they had cut stuff like that out and just focused more on the main story. I liked it for the most part, but again, it's like 2 or 3 episodes too long.
Yeah, and it's only 4 episodes, so that length really, I mean, like percentage-wise, you really feel it, that sort of stretching that happens there. Um, I kind of thought that it was like 30% really good and interesting and 70% garbage. Like, I think the 30% is like, they interview people who work there and people who were actually around at the time of Elisa Lam's disappearance, and like police officers who were working on the case. All of that stuff I found to be like credible and informative. And then they interview a ton of just YouTubers and people who are these like online sleuths. And like, I know that, there are some instances of people like this who actually help out in solving real cases that the police either don't want to or don't have the resources to solve or whatever. But this is one of those instances where, because of the weirdness of that video, for lack of a better term, so many people on YouTube latched onto that. And all of these, yeah, like you said, conspiracy theories just began to propagate. And I feel like this documentary's almost like glorification of these YouTubers and the way that they glommed onto the case is really disgusting to me. Like, there's this one guy who, it's just so, really like repulsive. The way that
it's
like
in very poor taste. Like they actually have footage of them like going there and like, we're in the elevator. It's like,
right,
dial it down a notch, folks. Like,
and at one point near the end, he this one guy who I feel like is one of the worst worst members of that community that is profiled or interviewed in this documentary series. He like claims that he feels such a connection to Elisa Lam, even though he's never met her and has only read her like Tumblr posts and has just spent a lot of time making YouTube videos about her, that he like sends somebody to her grave in Canada and like gets this person to, film footage of them putting their hand on this woman's grave and send it back to this guy so he can like make his connection to her feel more profound or something. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is so like disgusting, the way that you have turned this just human woman into like this icon that you're like trying to, this like content, for lack of a better term, like just fodder for YouTube videos. It's really I found it to be sickening.
I feel like it's trying to be too many things at once, because I do feel like if you made a documentary just about these YouTube sleuths and how they got everything wrong and how they clearly don't understand what, like, there's one part where they're zooming in on the elevator footage and they're like, this is someone else's foot and it's clearly just her foot. And it's like you don't need to be like Sherlock Holmes to realize that, but they're like convinced they're right. And I feel like that is interesting in theory because, you can draw a direct line between people who are like, look at this haunted elevator footage, and people who are like, Joe Biden runs a secret pedophile ring with,
Right.
You can draw a direct line between people like that because that's all over the internet. And I feel like if that's what the documentary was about, that's fine. But that just shoehorns itself into this other story about, this girl who disappeared. And then you have the whole Skid Row thing. It's like 3 different documentaries and they all don't work together. Like,
right.
It needed to just be like make up its mind. And I think, that's a problem.
I think so too. And the Skid Row stuff, I'm glad you enjoyed that part, because I found that to be like, the most sort of fascinating stuff. They have like a guy who's, I think like specifically, I think on the Chiron that pops up under his name is like I think he's a doctor and he's like a Skid Row historian or something. Like he seems to just only study that area. And I lived in LA for 10 years or something, and I didn't really know that much about Skid Row, even being so close in proximity to it. So I learned more about Skid Row in this documentary than I did like living there. So there's definitely some good stuff in here. I just found a lot of it to be really kind of cringy, and like the way that especially the YouTubers were sort of like put up on the same pedestal as like the police and people actually doing real investigative work. I just found to be, like you mentioned, in poor taste. So that is Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, which you can watch on Netflix right now if you want to.
It's worth pointing out that this is supposed to be the first in a series. Like every season is going to deal with a different infamous crime scene, and I really hope they get their shit together for whatever they're doing next. Because if the next season is going to be as like unfocused as this, I don't know if I'm going to stick with it, because I love the idea, and I do think this story, the story of this girl who came here and disappeared, is an interesting story, but you gotta make it interesting to watch. You can't just focus on lunatics on YouTube.
Yeah, God, I mean, that guy, that poor musician, that death metal musician you mentioned, like that's the saddest part of the whole thing. They go back to him near the end, and he's just talking about how his life was completely ruined by all these people making false claims against him, and none of them like ever reached out, of course, to apologize or say anything when he was, when his name was cleared and the truth was actually discovered. So the movie, I think, or the docuseries, like that is kind of the series turning, like throwing shade on these YouTubers, but it also devotes so much time to them and their opinions that I found it to be just, a little muddled in that regard. So,
yeah.
All right. Anyway, that is Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. Let's see. What else? Brad, you and I watched Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, which is the new movie starring Annie Mumolo and Kristen Wiig. What did you think about Barb and Star?
So this was the first movie that I really took the time to sit down and watch since everything happened. It just needed a little bit of levity, and I initially had a screener for this in advance, and I just didn't get a chance to watch it for obvious reasons. But I took the time to rent it because I saw people whose comedic tastes usually align with mine raving about how funny it was, and man, this was such a great escape from all the shitty stuff that's been happening lately, because this movie is nonsensically absurd and ridiculous and just so funny. It's just this great original comedy that has like flares of Austin Powers and Hot Rod and Roman Michelle's high school reunion, where Kristen Wiig and Annie Mumolo are just these two Midwestern women who are just quirky and odd, kind of in a Napoleon Dynamite way, but with a little bit more of like a SNL comedic style. And yeah, this was just so much fun, and like totally random bits that, where it borders on being a spoof because it's so silly. But it's not quite, a straight up like a genre parody or anything like that. We talked about this yesterday on the mailbag. I was so surprised by how fun Jamie Dornan is in this movie. He's clearly having a blast doing something completely different. It was just, I can't say enough kind things about just what a nice surprise this movie was. I really wish, this was a time when movie theaters were open, because I feel like it's the kind of movie that could really generate some word of mouth buzz and drive up some interest and get people back into theaters. But I hope that it's finding a good size audience on VOD, since it makes it accessible for everybody. And yeah, I thought it was great. What did you think?
I loved it, like unexpectedly. I know that Chris was raving about it last week, or at least praising it last week. And I mean, I kind of went in not really knowing anything about the details, like the plot details, other than just it's these two sort of like goofy Midwestern, 40-ish year old women who go on vacation to Florida. And I feel like that's the best way to go into it. Like, I don't want to give away anything about the mechanics of this movie, or like what is sort of like bubbling around the edges a little bit, because the randomness of it is really what sort of caught me off guard and made me like it as much as I do, I think. But the comedic performances are all great. It really feels like a movie that they don't make very much anymore, maybe if at all. Like, yeah, this is a throwback to a different type of comedy style. I mean, I think you just said, and I think Chris mentioned last week, Austin Powers, and it really kind of, that's like the most like relevant connective tissue point that I can draw.
And I said this last time or whenever I talked about this, but this really reminds me of like the early Muppet movies. I would love if they just handed the Muppets over to Kristen Wiig and Annie.
Oh gosh, that's a great idea, Chris. Man, I would love to see that.
Yeah, because like this is exactly that. And I said this before, but I really think it's deliberate, because they even have like a blatant reference to the first Muppet movie in this movie. So I kind of feel like they're like, these two women got high one night and were like laughing at Muppet movies, and we're like, let's make our own fun of that, but without Muppets.
Yeah, and it's this weird mixture of like wholesome, but like, there's like sex stuff that happens, but it's never explicit, so it kind of feels a little bit more family friendly, like kind of in like a little bit more of an edgy kind of Muppet adjacent property. You know, it's not like a full blown hard R rated movie or anything. But so yeah, I think tonally it sort of fits in there as well. But man, yeah, like there are so many like laugh out loud funny moments in this movie in a way that I have not experienced in like a mainstream comedy in a little while. So definitely it's one of those films that if you need a good laugh, this is something to put on, because there are so many jokes in it that even if some of them don't work, I think the chances that some of them do are really high. And like Damon Wayans Jr., I won't say anything about his character, but he was like one of the I don't know, I guess an MVP off the bench kind of character for me. He stole every scene he was in, and I loved that, the entire construction of that character and what he represented. So, yeah, Barb and Star, go to Vista Del Mar. It's available on VOD right now. Brad, did you have any closing thoughts about the movie? Anything else that you wanted to say?
No, just go watch it. It's a bright spot right now, and it's been a while since there's been a comedy like this, so it's worth seeking out. And it might seem weird in the first 10 minutes. You'll be like, "What the fuck is going on?" But just stick with it, and like I promise there'll be things that you like in it.
Yeah. Okay, HT, you and I watched To All the Boys, Always and Forever, which is the third and final movie in Netflix's To All the Boys I Loved Before teen rom-com trilogy. What did you think about this third entry?
I thought it was sweet. I thought it was a vast improvement over the second film, which it felt like that the second film, To All the Boys, P.S. I Still Love You, was definitely a film that was like trying to insert conflict and running on fumes. And while this film doesn't hold a candle to the charm and just surprising delight that was the first movie, it was really sweet. So this is the third and final film of the To All the Boys series, based on Jenny Han's novels, and it follows Lana Condor's character, Lara Jean Covey, and
Yes.
Peter Kavinsky, as they are preparing to both head to Princeton together. Peter on a scholarship for lacrosse. Stanford. I remember things. I watched this Friday. It was a sweet movie. But yeah, they prepared to head to Stanford together. But Lara Jean falls in love with New York University, NYU, and she decides to pursue her own dreams there at the cost of their still budding relationship. And I think it's I can't really say anything other than it's sweet. I do think that it does well at sort of trying to embrace that coming of age genre that sort of like turning point in a lot of teenagers' lives is that leaving of high school and entering graduation. But yeah, I think I just there's a montage at the end that basically is just the entire alludes to all the sweet scenes from the first film, and I was like, wow, the first film was so good. And it just kind of made me think of how good that first movie is, and how the third movie is sweet but not as delightful as that first movie.
Yeah, I like this one a lot too. I think the lead actors, Lana Condor and Noah Centineo, are just like super charming, and I agree wholeheartedly that this is like miles above the second film, which I thought just really almost nosedived the franchise because of the way that it sort of forced that conflict and just really felt like, okay, we know where this is going. We know that there's an inevitability to how this is going to end. And this entire second movie just feels like a big distraction, like a big, bump in the road that needs to be overcome instead of like an enjoyable viewing experience. And this movie is just like a purely enjoyable viewing experience pretty much all the way through. I think HT, what do you think about this movie's depiction of New York City? It's like, because I kind of found it to be like maybe the cleanest, like nicest sort of, it's very much in that like rom-com mold where like there's absolutely no downside to living in New York. It's like a flawless place.
It's super idealized. There's a scene where she and a bunch of other girls that she met at this rooftop party in Lower East Side, which is not something that a college kid would get invited to. I haven't even been to a rooftop party in Lower East Side. What are you talking about? To all the boys. She and a group of the girls just like take a couch into the subway, and they have like this moment where they're all sitting on the couch and laughing, and she's like, wow, New York City is where I need to be. And it's just it's super cheesy, and feels very much like a pastiche of every other like New York City rom-com where New York is the character, whatever. So I think that was a little bit like creatively lazy, where they much just basically leaned on, yeah, New York is great. Of course that she loves it. But at the same time, that's the only kind of scene where you really see New York and why she's drawn to it, and doesn't really, it kind of acts as a shorthand for like who Lara Jean is. Like, who does she want to be? You don't really know, except for she loves New York, and the movie doesn't really try to make up for her like lacking any kind of personal identity and ambition. But I guess New York is that identity now. But there have been many movies talking about how people form identities around New York anyway. So I guess that's a fine shorthand. But to me, it felt like they're just trying to use that as an out, so almost like a way of inserting more conflict. But it worked for me enough. Even though, what's her name, Genevieve, was just was also part of the impetus for her to move to New York, but she was kind of there to not be a character, but a device that makes random snarky comments every now and then.
Yep.
But
yeah, I think my theory about that scene that you mentioned about the couch on the subway is that they just needed an image to pop up when you hover over the tab on, or the tile on Netflix. They needed like some quirky image that looks like an album cover or something. So like that was the entire purpose of that scene, because like
totally
there's nobody else on the there's nobody else on the subway when they load this like hot pink couch into it, and they're all just like lounging on it like, oh wow, isn't New York great? But yeah, I think you bring up a good point, like the idea of her, it representing like her for the first two movies anyway. It seems like one of the defining characteristics of this character is just like her love and relationship with with her boyfriend Peter. And this movie, I think, is like a little bit more mature than the first two films, because it's more about like her coming to terms with what she wants and learning to not have her entire life be defined by that relationship, and just having that relationship be, a supporting component, and like one of many things about her instead of like the only thing about her. So I appreciated it on that level too. So yeah, to all the boys, always and forever, a cute movie, sweet movie, definitely a worthy entry in this franchise, much better than the second film. So you can watch that on Netflix right now if you like. And then the last thing that I watched was Judas and the Black Messiah. That movie just came out on HBO Max. I think it was this past Friday. And Shaka King directs this. It stars Lakeith Stanfield as William O'Neill, who was an FBI informant who infiltrated the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party in the late 1960s in Chicago. And Daniel Kaluuya plays Fred Hampton, and who is like the chairman of the party. And it's basically like a crime saga story about like a Departed-esque story about like this, infiltration and sort of, trying to bring down this guy who is like espousing all of these ideas about socialism and these sort of like anti-capitalist messages that sound very, very familiar in to our modern political discourse. But this was happening in the late 60s, and it's all about how the freaking FBI, man, they're just like the worst sometimes, because they I don't want to give away what happens to this. It's like a spoilers for real life scenario, but I just found this movie to be like really, really top tier on almost every level. It just feels like a real movie in the way that a lot of stuff that I've been watching at home over the past year doesn't. A lot of the sort of made for streaming stuff just feels like it never quite shifts into that full, proper movie gear, where all of the elements come together, the acting, the performance, or the performances, the cinematography, everything just like feels, big and larger than life and like super, super cinematic. And this movie checks all those boxes for me. And man, Lakeith Stanfield and Daniel Kaluuya are just like unreal in this movie. So I would highly recommend checking this out. It's going to be on HBO Max for I think 30 days or something, whatever their deal is with Warner Brothers. The first 30 days it'll be available for quote unquote free on HBO Max. So if you subscribe to that service, then you can just watch it right now. It's also in some theaters. I don't know what the deal is with that. I would not say to go out and see this movie or any movie in theaters right now, but yeah, man, it's very good, and I'm curious if you guys get a chance to watch it, what you all think. I have not had a chance to really read about it as much as I've wanted to. I haven't read any reviews or anything, but one of the points that I've seen raised on this on Twitter about this film is that it might have been a little bit more effective to have to cast slightly younger actors. Kaluuya and Stanfield are not like old people by any stretch of the imagination, but Fred Hampton and William O'Neill were actually way younger in real life than either of these two actors. I think Fred Hampton was only like 21 years old when, during the events of this movie. So I think the idea that I've seen put forth on Twitter is like, it kind of does a disservice to those people by having them be portrayed by people who are older and seem a little bit more, self-assured and all of that. And like there might have been some value in having younger people have that sort of charisma and like incredible speaking persona and just like ability to hold an audience wrapped, in the middle of in the palm of their hand. And somebody who's going through, such an intense conflict like this William O'Neill character. By having them be actors who were 21 or something instead of like in their mid 30s or whatever, might have been, more illustrative or something like that. So anyway, I look forward to reading.
Circumstances even more tragic too, as they were in real life, because just seeing men so young basically be used as puppets and pawns in this elaborate scheme by the U.S. government and this war that they're waging, it would just feel even more tragic and real. So yeah, I think that's a good point. But on reviews, you should read Chris's review on Slash Film.
Yeah, I still need to do that. I have it bookmarked, but I haven't read it yet. But
you can skip it. It's not one of my best reviews. It's all right.
No, I'll definitely be reading it. So Shaka King, man, that's one of my big takeaways from this is like I have not seen any of the other stuff that he's done. I think he just directed like one pretty small indie movie, many years ago. But this sort of announces him as like a filmmaker that I need to pay attention to going forward. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he does next. So Judas and the Black Messiah is streaming on HBO Max right now, and it is very, very good. So let's see who is next. Brad, what else have you been watching?
I finished season 5 of Friends recently, continuing my way through the series. Gotta tell you, as time is going on, getting pretty annoyed with all this Ross and Rachel business. They're just the relationship just it's crumbling, and I know.
So yeah, what's the status in season 5? Like where you are right now? What's happened in the very recent past, and where are they right now?
So beginning they were dealing with Ross having trouble with his marriage to this British woman named Emily, and so then that crumbled and they got divorced and everything, and so then they were both, Ross and Rachel, were single and dating other people for a while. But then now at the end of this season, they all went to Vegas to see Joey because he was supposed to be shooting this indie movie, and Ross and Rachel ended up getting hammered and surprisingly getting married at a Las Vegas like quick chapel, when it looked like it was going to be Monica and Chandler doing a much more romantic and cute quick wedding in Las Vegas, but instead they stumbled upon Ross and Rachel doing it. And so they just ruin, what I'm liking now more is Monica and Chandler's relationship than Ross and Rachel. And so now I'm going to see what happens at the beginning of season 6. And so I will say I do like the trend that what they keep doing with these season finales, where it's a 2-part episode. They all end up in a completely different location, and then it carries over to the beginning of the next season with some kind of big changing event. This one kind of frustrating, obviously, because like, okay, cool, so they're being irresponsible and stupid again. But yeah, it's still fun to watch. I think I said before, I think Chandler is probably my favorite character. I'm enjoying Joey and Phoebe very much too for the the goofiness that they bring to the equation. And my favorite things, still comes from just seeing different like stars who were on the show when they were still kind of up and coming in their career. In the season finale this time, Thomas Lennon appears as this blackjack dealer who Joey gets obsessed with because he says he's his hand twin, which is very exciting to him for some reason. And then I was surprised to see, I wouldn't have known who this was if I didn't know that there was a Punky Brewster reboot coming to Peacock this year. But Salil Moon Frye had a small role as someone who dated Joey briefly, who kept like jokingly punching him and started hurting him, and so he didn't really like that. But yeah, and then Phoebe had triplets this year that she gave to her brother and his older girlfriend, played by Deborah Jo Rupp. Bob Balaban showed up as Phoebe's father, surprisingly, and so there's just cool, fun stuff like that here and there that I really enjoy. And so the show's still fun, as frustrated as I'm getting with the Ross and Rachel of it all.
How many seasons of Friends were there, Brad?
There's 10.
Oh wow! So you're only at the halfway point then.
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay. Man. Well, best of luck in the back half there.
For sure.
Okay, HC. What else have you been watching?
I have been watching the Brandy Cinderella, more commonly known as Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. When I watched this when I was young, I didn't realize it was a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, and I found that I'm on a surprising Rodgers and Hammerstein streak, having watched Sound of Music last week and now the Brandy Cinderella. And I call this that because this is the third remake of the Rodgers and Hammerstein TV musical for Cinderella, the first of which starred a young Julie Andrews, I think in 1965. And then there's another one in the 70s. No, she was in the 40s one. I don't know the dates for this. I'm sorry. Anyways, the Brandy Cinderella is a really, really fun, like nostalgic trip for me. This is the first time it's available on streaming ever, and I hadn't seen it since I was a kid, and I just really enjoyed watching it again, and was surprised that I remembered all the songs, which are all still great, by the way, and even more Rodgers and Hammerstein like flavored than I had even thought that they would be. I guess it's just my having watched Sound of Music and this back to back. I'm like, wow, they do sound very similar, but I had forgotten how much this film looked like it was made by someone who had just seen color for the first time, because it is gaudy, it is garish, but it's so, so fun and obnoxious in a way that I think toes the line, but keeps it really just memorable and delightful in that way. Probably because the cast performances, especially by supporting characters like Bernadette Peters and Jason Alexander, are so big and outsized and loud that it matches the color and the production design. Whitney Houston, of course, is perfect as the fairy godmother. Brandy is really lovely, although whenever she sings that the duet with Whitney Houston, Impossible, she does almost get drowned out a little bit. Whitney's holding back quite a bit in that duet, but it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed watching it again and just seeing that multicultural, diverse cast that they had without any explanation. I always love that they have like an Asian prince played by a Filipino actor. I remember his last name is Maltban. I can't remember his first name. I'm very unprepared for this. I have an Asian prince whose parents are Whoopi Goldberg and Vincent Garber.
Victor Garber?
Yes, Victor Garber. So yeah, that was always really amusing to me. And yeah, a fun time. Very cheesy. Definitely is very short and feels like a made-for-TV musical, but in a way that the rose-colored glasses I have for it still remain intact.
So that's Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. Is that on Disney Plus?
It is on Disney Plus.
Okay, cool. And then you've been watching one other thing, right?
Yes, I watched Framing Britney Spears, which is the New York Times Hulu documentary about Britney Spears and her very turbulent life in the spotlight and the conservatorship that she is still under, and the Free Britney movement that has been taking place in the past couple of years to attempt to free her from this conservatorship, which puts her under the financial and personal control of her father, Jamie Spears. And I had heard a lot of the discourse around this documentary beforehand, which had piqued my interest in watching it. A lot of like blowback from the documentary in like celebrities and various media personalities apologizing for their treatment of Britney Spears, and kind of the whole like internet, a whole culture kind of coming to terms with how terribly they treated her and how vulturistic the very misogynistic media like had basically like torn her apart and treated her as fodder for their own amusement. And seeing all this discourse, I'd kind of expected the documentary to be more about that. And while it dedicated a good like half of the film to like her treatment under the media and where she came from and how this all kind of came to be, and how she came under the conservatorship. It also dedicated a lot more airtime to the Free Britney movement than I had thought it to be. And I think this is because this is a New York Times documentary feature. It's actually only about an hour, 10 minutes long, and it's part of a like a feature storytelling series from New York Times. It's not a standalone film, but part of like a longer like docu-series from New York Times under Hulu. So I guess that kind of makes sense in that New York Times, of course, would hone in on a more timely topic to sort of go back into a more in-depth investigation, to like a in-depth analysis of everything. But they dedicate like way more time to the Free Britney movement, basically just giving all of this airtime to this Britney Spears podcast that basically like analyzes her Instagram feed, and were kind of the spearheaders of the Free Britney movement after they had noticed that she like disappeared for a couple months, and checked into a rehab facility, and they basically theorized that she didn't do this of her own free will, and started the Free Britney movement out of that. And it gave a lot of free like airtime to the two girls who run that podcast, as well as the many activists who are part of the Free Britney movement and what kind of impact they made on her. While I was much more interested in just like the more deep analysis of the media culture and how Britney was treated. And it felt like that was much more interesting. And I had like people who were close to Britney, as well as various like media personalities, even some paparazzi speak about it. And that was just like, really fascinating. But it felt like there was one voice that was sorely missing, which was Britney's own voice. And we see some archival footage, and we hear interviews of her talking about how like her own sort of agency and speaking a little bit about the conservatorship under a different documentary, but she's conspicuously absent in this. And the New York Times does say at the end that they tried to reach out to her, but they don't even know if those requests reached her. So it's a good documentary. It's like fascinating, but I do think that the whole subject deserves a much longer and much more thorough look. Like Britney Spears for sure is one of the many victims of that kind of vulturistic and misogynistic media culture that arose in the 90s and early 2000s. And I think that we could definitely see we could afford to see another documentary that goes much more insight into that.
Yeah, and I think you wrote an article for Slash Film either yesterday or the day before that said that Netflix is developing their own Britney Spears documentary with the director Aaron Lee Carr, who made Mommy, Dead, and Dearest, which is a documentary about the Gypsy Blanchard case, which was then adapted into that Hulu show, The Act. So people might be familiar with that story. So yeah, hopefully Aaron Lee Carr's Britney Spears documentary will sort of fill in those gaps and give you what you're looking for, what you're sort of hoping that this would be, more fully focused on. So, okay, let's see. What else do we have? What we've been eating. Brad, what have you been eating recently?
Yeah, I'm still on my bullshit when it comes to trying these things because it helps. And so I recently stumbled upon Ultimate Cheddar Doritos, which aren't aren't remarkably different from nacho cheese Doritos, but like nacho cheese Doritos don't really taste like nacho cheese. They just taste like cheese chips with like a little bit of a kick to it. Not even to the point where they're spicy, but they have like a spice to them, I guess you could say. And so these are essentially, I guess, what you would say a more mild version of them, where they're just basically cheddar Doritos, where the cheese flavor is a little bit different. So I don't think that they're quite as good as like nacho cheese Doritos, but they're not bad for being a different kind of cheesy Dorito for anyone who is, I guess, insane enough not to like nacho cheese Doritos. And so then so a couple of my friends sent a care package to me and my girlfriend with some stuff in it, just to kind of, help lessen the blow and whatnot. And they included some chips that apparently they only get them in Mexico. They're exclusive over there. And so there's these chili limon Fritos. And normally I don't go out of my way to get stuff that has like the lime flavor or even the chili flavor, because usually here it's like the flaming hot with lime and stuff like that, and that's just not my thing. But these are actually surprisingly good. The lime flavor is subtle, the chili isn't spicy, and the Fritos formula, if you will, seems like it's a little different from American Fritos. I'm not necessarily sure what the reason for that is, but they taste a little bit, I guess, more airy. They're not quite as dense as Fritos corn chips that we have here, but the flavor is good. And then they also sent me these queso and chili crujitos, which are basically like the shape and like texture and whatnot of Taco Bell cinnamon twists, but instead of being cinnamon, it's queso and chili flavored. And so it's, I guess what you would say, like a dry, like nacho cheese dip kind of flavor on this like crunchy, crisp twist thing. And those were also pretty good.
Brad, I just realized all this talk about chili flavored stuff. I also have something to contribute to this category for the first time in a very, very long time.
Nice.
I tried the limited time flavor Lay's Game Day chili chips. Have you ever had those?
Oh, actually, you just reminded me that I have tried those as well. Yeah, what did you think of those?
I liked them. It was one of those just complete impulse purchases. I never really do this, but I just saw it on the shelf and it said limited time. Maybe there was something about that where I was like, I guess I gotta, if I'm gonna try this, it's now or never kind of thing. I have no idea how often that actually comes back around, if it really is limited or what. But I was just like, I'm gonna give this a shot, and I ended up liking them a lot. So it's a little bit weird to have a potato chip taste really kind of a lot like a bowl of chili, but for some reason it worked for me. So.
Yeah, no, they definitely nailed the flavor to the point where it's not just the chili flavor, but like you get a hint of the cheese and even the sour cream. So yeah, those I like those too, and they're even good, dipping them, in a cheese dip as well. So. On this the same crispy kind of route. So this year is like the 50th anniversary of Cocoa Pebbles and Fruity Pebbles. So like Post is doing like a bunch of new stuff like tied to both cereals, where they're releasing them in different forms. Essentially, like there's coffee creamers out there, and one of the things that I just finally got my hands on are they're releasing both Fruity Pebbles and Cocoa Pebbles as crisps, and so. Initially, I thought that it was just going to be like the cereal that they had shaped into like a crisp form and would essentially taste just like the cereal. And it's not quite that, because they're crispy rice snacks that are essentially flavored like Cocoa Pebbles and Fruity Pebbles. And so the aftertaste, you're like, oh, okay, so these are flavored rice cakes that are just smaller and thinner. And so the Cocoa Pebbles ones are fine. The chocolate flavor doesn't last very long once you're actually eating the crisps, and then it starts to taste more like the rice cakes. The Fruity Pebbles, the flavor is stronger, and it doesn't feel like it dissipates into just tasting like a rice snack. So I think the Fruity Pebbles ones are better. And so it's so weird to say, because like I guess I just wish that it would have just been the cereal in like a crisp form. And sure, I can just go get a handful of Cocoa Pebbles or Fruity Pebbles if I want to, but I guess it's just the convenience of having like, oh, this is a cereal chip essentially, But they're fun, and so like I think those are available at various grocery stores, and they're gluten free if that's something that you care about, that you try to avoid. So you can try them and not worry about exploding or whatever gluten does to people like that. And then the last thing I tried is Coca-Cola has released a new version of it's Coca-Cola with coffee. And so the only one I've tried so far is the regular one, but there's 3 different flavors. There's the regular, there's vanilla, and there's caramel. And there was a time years ago, I want to say when I was in college, maybe, that they released Coca-Cola Black, which was Coca-Cola with coffee. And the formula for this one seems like it's a little bit different. I remember the coffee flavor in Coca-Cola Black being stronger, and it's still definitely present here, but it feels like it's a little more subtle maybe. And so if you're someone who likes coffee and Coke, I think it's worth it to try. I'm not sure if it's like a necessarily a replacement for having your coffee in the morning or anything like that. But I do have the caramel and the vanilla ones, but I haven't tried them yet. So I'll definitely let you guys know how those are once I do.
Cool. All right. I think that's going to bring us to the end of today's episode of Slash Film Daily. This podcast is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all of the popular podcast apps, and send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and mailbag prompts to us at peter@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget also to rate and review the podcast on iTunes. It helps us out a ton. Tell your friends, spread the word. Jacob is not here, so we're not going to be doing the joke book today. I know everybody's probably heartbroken about that. I apologize. But yes, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.